most important part of American music. And a lot of people don't know where blues came from. But it's said to have come from the Deep South during a time when men were out working in the cotton fields and the vegetable places where they grow vegetables in mass quantities in the South, Mississippi, Louisiana, things like that. And the men had to find a way to get through the day, so they would yell things at each other. And these sort of turned into songs. They're called field hollers and work calls and things that now come to be known as blues. And there were a lot of deviated paths with the blues because it kind of turned into jazz in the New Orleans area, in Louisiana. But in the Mississippi Delta, it turned into something completely different, although they had some similarities. There were certain beats, there were certain melodies or certain things that people did. And this all became known as different types of music like gospel and boogie-woogie and rock and roll and just a ton of different variants. But the start of it all, where did it come from? We're going to say Mississippi Delta. And the person who was the biggest proponent of it was a minstrel show promoter, a band leader named William Christopher Handy, W.C. Handy. And he's claims to have been the father of the blues, and that's what they call him. But my contention is that the guy who really got the blues going was a man named Robert Johnson, who only wrote 29 songs in 27 years. And one day he went to Chicago and he recorded all these songs that were mainly from the Mississippi Delta. And they became known as 12-bar blues and very commonly copied by, I should say covered by, a myriad of musicians, rock and roll, people that just, you probably heard somewhere along the line, and they're still doing this, they're still copying songs like sounds something like that, probably better than that. I'm not used to standing, I usually sit, but there's no chairs. Anyway, Robert Johnson wrote a lot of songs that were about things that the blues covered, losing your partner, losing your mule, losing your dog. But he also wrote about things that were uplifting and funny, and things that kind of got your mind off the blues, I think. So he put a lot of different sounds in his guitar. He could play with a thing called a slide. And these were actually made out of bottlenecks originally. This one is a Corsedon bottle. It used to have medicine in it. But you can buy these now in a music store. I don't know if you can buy Corsedon anymore, they make them out of plastic. But they would make it sound like this. And Robert Johnson got a long way with that, but he died when he was 27 years old. And a man named Elmore James kind of picked up the torch and began making a lot of songs along those lines in the 30s and the 40s. And then that guy named Big Bill Grunzy, he was big, he was like 6'4", 300 pounds. And another man named Leadbelly, that was not his real name, but that's what everybody called him, would play songs on a guitar like this one. This is a 12-string guitar. And most blues songs originally were written on smaller, much smaller, 6-string guitars. And they weren't very loud. This one's very loud, by comparison. But I think that Big Bill Grunzy wrote the song, blues song, that influenced so many people. Now, I would classify blues music as folk music. There is folk music that is from Celtic, origin. And there's music from Africa origin. That's the blues. But folk music is something that I think covers the spectrum of blues and other areas of music. I like the blues because it's very real. It sounds, to me, very earthy. I like folk music too, but I think that blues music inspired so many people. And a lot of rock and roll. I grew up listening to rock and roll. And I don't know why, but I could never figure out where did this music come from until I began looking at Robert Johnson, Elmer James, Big Bill Grunzy. And I figured out that that's where all this was coming from. And I wanted to go back to the roots and learn some of that. And I tried. And so the song that inspired me the most was this one. I got the key to the highway, built bound down the road. Don't leave me running, walking as much too slow. Now that inspired Bob Dylan so much that he had a speech just about that. And he said that Big Bill Grunzy was a genius for writing that song because it expressed so much feeling about, that was just one verse of it, so much feeling in one song. And I have to tend to agree. But I've heard a million people play that song. Eric Clapton, oh gosh, Joe Bonamassa. A lot of people get into that. Now, that song came out in 1941, and then it was followed by the war, which changed things quite a bit. There were a lot of different things happening racially in this country, and so I think blues was getting more acceptance, as was jazz. But people wanted to dance, so they wanted to play songs like boogie woogie, things that were more swing. Rhythm and blues came out in the 50s, and that's more danceable, more melodic type of songs. And I think that people they're drawn to it. So the blues kind of, to a point, was subjugated. But then a guy named Elvis Presley showed up, and he began playing and singing. And he and Jerry Lee Lewis and, oh gosh, the name, Johnny Cash, played a lot of blues. Now, they changed it up a little bit. They made it sound less black, we'll say. They made it sound a little more anglicized. But they were still playing the blues. I mean, you can't argue that Elvis Presley was a blues player. But he went on to do many more things. So I think that the 50s really started changing things for the blues. And by the 60s, things had changed quite a bit, and the blues was shoved overseas. Mainly the American black blues players. Luther Allison, Howlin' Wolf, they all went to England and France, and they stayed there for the most part because people weren't accepting the blues in this country anymore. It wasn't as accepted as it was in the 40s and 30s. And after that, I think that the whole world changed with the Vietnam War and psychedelia. Who knows what psychedelia is? That's where you play the blues really loud and you have a lot of effects and there's all kind of fuzz tones and wah-wah pedals and things that make the music sound completely different and weird, really. But I think it had its roots in the blues. Because it was very basic music. There wasn't a lot to it. It's just loud and very strange sounding. And so by the 70s, the blues had kind of, psychedelia was on its down. Disco was in, and I think that people really kind of just sort of let the blues go. But I will tell you that every 10, 12, maybe 15 years, the blues comes back. And I hope it never leaves completely. Although there are times when I play a song for somebody and they kind of go, what was that? And I said, oh, that's Eric Clapton's song. I played at Eve's party who was there. And I said, well, what is it? I said, blues. Basically blues. It's not the 12-bar blues that I was just playing. It's more of a sophisticated blues. And the kind of thing that you can play at a party and people will understand and relate to a little bit more. A lot of feeling, a lot of soul. So I encourage you all to continue to listen to the blues because it's always going to be with us, I think. And it will continue to spawn many other types of music as well. Oh, one thing I didn't mention was ragtime, one of my favorite forms of music. There's a movie called Ragtime. So another spawn of the blues, keep listening to it.